Today, we're diving into the state of work around the globe, and let me tell you, the latest report from the International Labor Organization paints a really fascinating picture. It's kind of like a mystery, actually. On the one hand, the global job market looks shockingly stable. But if you look just a little bit closer, there are some pretty serious cracks starting to appear. So let's get into it.
All right, so let's just ask the big question right up front. Is the global job market okay? Now, if you only looked at the main headline number, you'd almost certainly say, yeah, it looks great.
Because check this out. The projected global unemployment rate for 2026 is just 4.9%. I mean, that is historically a very, very low and stable number. It kind of suggests that, hey, despite all the chaos in the world, if you want a job, you can pretty much find one. So, case closed, right? Well, not so fast.
So let's start there, with that surprisingly stable picture. Because what the ILO report shows is that even with all the uncertainty floating around, the job market itself has been, well, incredibly tough to knock down. And this is what's so interesting. You've got business confidence falling, consumer confidence falling, and yet global GDP is still expected to grow by a pretty solid 3.1%. And like we just saw, unemployment is holding steady. This right here is that calm, placid surface of our story. But now it's time to look at the cracks forming just beneath. And this brings us right to the heart of the problem. It's what the ILO calls the decent work deficit. You see, having a job is one thing, but is it a good job? A job that gives you some security, a fair income, maybe some social protection, because that's where this whole picture gets a lot darker.
284 million. Just let that sink in. That's how many workers around the world are still living in extreme poverty. These people have jobs, but they're earning less than $3 a day. That's not nearly enough to build a better life.
And then you see a number like this. 2.1 billion people are in what's called informal employment. That means they have no contract, no social security, basically no safety net whatsoever. It is a deeply precarious way to live, and it's the reality for a huge portion of the world's workforce. And this slide, wow, this slide really hammers home how serious the problem is. Just look at the difference. In the decade from 2005 to 2015, we saw a massive 15 percentage point drop in working poverty. That's amazing. But the decade after that, a tiny 3.1 point drop. The engine that was lifting people up, it's basically ground to a halt. And what about the next generation? Well, there are 257 million young people who are not in employment, education, or training. You might have heard the term NEET. This isn't just a statistic, It represents a massive loss of potential for an entire generation that's missing out on building the skills they need for the future. And of course, inequality is still a huge piece of this story. The jobs gap doesn't just count the unemployed. It includes everyone who wants a job but can't find one. And by 2026, that gap is expected to be 4.3 percentage points higher for women than for men. That just shows you how many extra barriers women are still facing out there. So what is going on here? Why is the world creating jobs but not enough good jobs? To really get it, we have to look under the hood at the engine of the global economy itself, because it's changing in some really fundamental ways. The key idea here is something called economic transformation. For decades, this was the engine of progress. As countries got richer, workers would move from lower productivity jobs, like on a farm, to higher productivity jobs, like in a factory or an office. This big shift is what created better jobs, higher wages, and lifted millions and millions of people out of poverty. But here's the problem. That engine is sputtering. The ILO found that the speed of this transformation, the rate at which workers are moving to better sectors, has been cut in half over the last 20 years. This is so important. The world's main machine for creating better quality work, it's breaking down. So we've established that progress has stalled. But if we look to the future, well, the picture gets even more complicated. There are some major storms gathering on the horizon that could make all of this even worse. The report points to 3 huge risks: the disruption from AI, rising public debt, and all the uncertainty around global trade. Let's just quickly break each one down. First up, AI. This is the question on everybody's mind, right? But what the report found is a really surprising twist, especially for people who are just starting their careers. Okay, now this is fascinating. You'd think getting a university degree would protect you from automation, but for young people in high-income countries, the opposite is true. Those with an advanced education are actually more exposed to the risk of AI automation than their peers with less education, because AI is targeting those entry-level, high-skilled jobs.
And at the same time all this is happening, governments are taking on more and more debt, which squeezes their ability to pay for social support or job creation programs. On top of that, with global trade being so uncertain, companies are getting nervous, so they're less likely to invest, which slows down the creation of the exact kind of high-quality jobs we need most.
And this all brings us to the ultimate conclusion of the report, and it's summed up perfectly right here by the ILO's Director General. The old idea that a rising tide of economic growth will just lift all boats, it's not enough anymore. We can have growth and we can have low unemployment, and we can still see millions of people left behind in poverty and precarious work.
And so this is where we end up. The data shows a world of work that looks stable on the surface, but is deeply, deeply strained underneath. And the future looks even more challenging. So the real question is, are our societies prepared to deal with this new world of work?